In this video, me philosophizing on intellect, concerned with the overarching personality characteristics most meaningful related to languageability and or love of learning and or philosophical curiosity. Languageability concerns uniquely distinctions within one's communication of analytic terms, well-defined. One may elaborate clear communications always in relation to one's knowledgeability, to mean that one whom is communicating vagnesses within many different possible probabilistic terms one may repeat consistently and tend to repeat less consistently to communicate inconsistencies within one's communications compared to individuals who communicate clearly within the repetition of certain more logically, creatively articulate and or complex vocabs drawn from more distinct vocabs with distinct vocabulations unique often to the individual whom is allowance the creative thinking from the vastness ranging the prior existing knowledgeability within one's cultivated vocabs, vocabulating the vocalizations from internal meaningful utterances of thought into the muscle movements within one's facial muscles to communicate the diction and or appropriate syllable compositions to communicate clearly what one means in terms of the appropriate articulation of one's thinking. One may define clearly and or accurately to the best approximation compared to the individual whom is more likely to experience psychotic disorders associated with schizophrenia and or bipolar disorder and or other paranoid schizophrenic and or paranoid personality disorders, meaningful to explain the variance in terms of individuals who may report to be high in languageability and yet whom are lower in knowledgeability and or whom are suffering from chronic disease and or illness amongst psychiatric disorder in need of medical treatment and the appropriate treatment to provide the appropriate responses to one's illness. To mean that languageability is positively associated with the psychological immunity allowance from one's knowledgeability and or satisfying certain underlying psychological needs for cognition, often to elaborate in detailed communications, that is positively associated with love of learning, more meaningful to explain the elaborations, yet that the elaborations are needed to appropriately communicate articulately the healthy psychological functioning languageability. One is able to easier access knowledge and or evaluate that knowledge appropriately to the communications drawn from the appropriate vocabs, each with its own unique theory of knowledge that one may, within more distinct communications with other individuals who tend to be more elaborate within their communications and tend to have a detailed and or vast-ranging combination of vocabs they may string together in terms of the amount of analytic terms one holds self-knowledge and or self-awareness of to articulate the complexities of one's being to another whom holds some meaningful similarity in terms of the vocabs one holds knowledge and yet truly uniquely always holds some distinct other vocabs another may not know and or perhaps never know, be it that one may know another language and hold distinct self-knowledge and or self-awareness unique to the other languages one may hold self-knowledge and or self-awareness of, compared to love of learning, more unique to the elaborations that detail out complexities within one's communications, that elaborate the sophistications of one's thinking to provide detail and or more complex solutions, engaging creative problem solving proactively, meaningful to the comprehension and or explorations within unknown unknowns to fill in gaps in meaningful information more meaningfully, compared to the last personality characteristic associated with philosophical curiosity, more meaningful for engaging philosophizing and or one's ability to brainstorm distinct solutions to complex philosophical problems one may experientially encounter from perhaps engaging one's own love of learning within reading about philosophy and or being exposed to the learning material as one is ingesting the unique posited truth claims within the text one is inferring causations and or responding to questions concerning meaning in life and or the big questions, including what is the origins of life and or what is the origins of one's existentia, what is the origins of the universe, and or responding to, in some cases, existential questions of freedom, be it that there are certain paradoxes of freedom concerning the worthwhileness of engaging certain conducts that are in some subsequent encounters experientially meaningless to the self, and yet one may hold within certain other experiential encounters to be most meaningful, and or may experience the crippling of what is in some cases more meaningful to conduct compared to what is less meaningful conduct, to not necessarily conduct within one's mind what is appropriate to conduct future oriented to allowance the most meaningful living, and or in some cases may engage the misconducts that are more detrimental to one's subjective well-being at the expense of one's subjective well-being and or crippling of one's freedoms, to truly within the possibilities one may conduct, be it an infinite range and vastness one may opt to conduct, may be paralyzed from the amount of possible probabilistic options with truly uniquely like 7 out of an infinite range optimal possible options one may conduct that are appropriate and or meaningful to the self, with the other ones truly more likely to waste time and or in some cases result in harm and or injury that are more concerning and or may prevent one from engaging meaningfully in certain conducts and or may be more motivated to engage in misconducts out of the threats and or harm and or injury in getting it wrong, paralyzed by the paradoxes of freedom in some cases, that one whom is more philosophically curious tends to generate more meaningful solutions to philosophical problems, resolving with practical wisdom what is more meaningful, compared to individuals who are less philosophically curious, like Billy Tomrick Joe, who works a 9-to-5 job, perhaps doing the paving for different driveways to do the asphalt, pouring steamy gasoline on the asphalt, going home with a grease strip shirt, beige in color, to claim he has the antidote to the world's problems, yet cannot provide a clear communication in terms of responding to a meaningful philosophical problem, nor provide a clear response to the meaning in life, and perhaps himself thinks often life is meaningless without a appropriate resolution to what one may conduct to live more meaningfully, living a more meaningful life, having contemplated what constitutes a meaningful life. from inferences into certain intrinsic processes and or intrinsic properties that may respond, in some cases, to engage more valued conducts from one's will to conduct more original values one is responsible for, and not the values that are expected of another to constitute the false values less likely to be meaningful to one, instead of the original values that connect one to certain distinct mind-body connections meaningful to elaborate the complexities of one's being, to engage healthy psychological functioning more likely in the future to elicit certain positive, meaningful emotions amongst the cultivations of practical wisdom from the valued conducts that allowance tried and true solutions to conflicts and or certain domain-specific problems that are complex to solve, to build on and or explore more future-oriented opportunities to contribute positively to society, that allowance for meaningful living, and that are indicators of certain positive outcomes related to physical and or psychological health and or physical and or psychological well-being that are resultant from healthy psychological functioning, and most meaningfully one's optimal subjective well-being, engaging positive, meaningful emotion, and or the absorptions within one's meaningful work, cultivating what is meaningful to conduct certain valued conducts appropriate to allowance individuals to experience more relief and or resolve the underlying issues related to certain underlying psychological need satisfactions appropriate to engaging more ethical, meaningful conducts with honest, clear communications. That individuals who tend to be higher in philosophical curiosity tend to be more apt to communicate clearly the intracategorical and or intercategorical effectivenesses and or efficiencies, having often generated distinct solutions to the most complex problems you can think of within philosophy, exploring the frontiers of the unknown unknowns, to within distinct situations confronted with meaningful similarities related to those unknown unknowns, provide solutions to problems that offer practical wisdom in some cases without even having been exposed to the distinct problem existing prior, to allowance for more creativity within one's communications to often solve complex problems Billy, Tom, Rick, Joe may have more difficulty with resolving. Individuals who tend to be higher in intellect uniquely are more likely to be concerned with human rights and or freedoms violations, and are often the individuals whom are most responsible for contributing to intellectual property and or advancements in terms of the protections on human rights and or freedoms, often directly and or indirectly from original instantiations, engaging even within one's original work, having engaged self-conducted learning, whom are more likely to engage self-conducted learning and also self-disciplining within domain-specific meaningful pursuits within the learning, elaborating one's love of learning in depth and or exploring